hounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hounds, ghosts, demons are coming.
Welcome home, my little hellhounds. Tonight we have 3 scary stories to sink our hellish teeth into. I was just thinking if you guys could comment down below what stories you would like to see in the future. I know a few want cryptids, but it will be interesting what people suggest. Please like the video if you do, as this will really help our little channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. If you have any stories you would like narrated on the channel, then please send them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now let's get right into it. Don't assume you're an anonymous author on Reddit, posted by MTP6921. Reddit has afforded me the ability to be a controversial writer while being anonymous. I'm a teacher who works mostly with cutthroat women. We mostly smile at each other, but deep down we are all very competitive and want to be seen as the best teacher in the eyes of the parents, students, and our principal. I messed up somehow. I must have given away too much information about myself in one of my stories. It may seem like, oh well, what's the big deal? But some of the stories I have written, like my crush on the boy in my class, will at the very least get me fired. I feel so goddamn stupid right now. I never thought this day would come. I insinuated too much in my stories that I was a teacher, where I must have motivated someone to put all the clues together. In my 50 somewhat stories I have written, I have to focus on damage control now. I'm not sure if I'll outright deny that I'm the author, or if I'll imply my story is protected under free speech. The only problem I have is the court of public opinion will hang me when I try to dissuade people from thinking that my story about making love to a boy was just harmless piece of fiction. The private message I received on Reddit stated, "The Fog Creek Elementary School must be proud to have such an accomplished writer on their staff." I don't know what this unknown person wants, but my life is in the writer's hands. Let's face it, if I get fired from my teaching job, there are 0 other school districts that will hire me. Moreover, my husband will divorce me and I'll be fighting over custody for my daughter. But once I'm publicly exposed, and when my story, having a kid was the single worst mistake I made in my life, is brought up in court, then I will have an uphill custody battle. The private message from the _detective 123 stated, as long as you do what I say, you won't be identified. I know this is blackmail, but even if I'm right, the detective will get arrested and my identity will be exposed. So it's a lose-lose situation for me. When I asked the detective, "What do you want me to do?" the writer responds, "I want you to go to 437 Main Street tonight and knock on the door. If you follow my guy's instructions, then I won't ask anything from you for the next 2 weeks." I responded, "So what happens after I knock on the door?" The detective 123 replied, "Then you do what you are told. Arrive at 7 p.m. tonight." I'm so used to being in charge and being respected. The third graders will do anything I ask, and their parents go out of their way to be nice to me for special treatments towards their kids. I've never been in a situation where I was an unwilling participant. I really dreaded going to this unknown person's house. I finished school for the day. Then I cooked dinner for my husband Craig and my 11-year-old daughter Grace. After dinner, I told Craig that I had a school function tonight and I didn't know what time I would be home. The first words out of Craig's mouth were, "I didn't see anything on the calendar about tonight." I responded, "I know, but something came up and all the teachers have to go." Craig said, "Okay, I'll make sure Grace gets situated for bed tonight." At 6:50 p.m. I left my house. I had no idea what I was supposed to do after I knocked on the door, but my mind wondered that I would be doing the very worst. So I got to the door and I knocked. A guy in his early 70s answered the door and said, "You must be Gina, right?" I replied, "Yes." He looked like Clint Eastwood, but maybe a little bit heavier. He had an old bed and breakfast that is a virtual mansion. It had a grand staircase and its own library. The old man then said, "Well, I have you until 10 p.m, so take off your pants and shirt and meet me in the library." I responded, "There's no way I'm doing that." And the old man replied, "That's fine, you know where the front door is, right?" I replied, "But what happens to me?" The old man responded, "I don't know what happens to you, but I get a refund." I stood there in front entrance for a few moments and I unfortunately came to the conclusion that I couldn't leave. So I said, "Okay, I'll do what you want." So I got down to my underwear and bra and did the walk of shame to the library. Once I got into the library, the old man directed me to get onto my hands and knees in front of his chair and then face the door. So I got on the floor as the old man sat in his chair. Then he put on one of his feet on my back and then the other. I then realised that I was being used as a footrest. He picked up a newspaper Then he proceeded to open it up and he started to read it. Occasionally he would move his legs around, which was really uncomfortable on my back, and he kept his slippers on as well. It was nearly an hour on my hands and knees, and they were killing me. He eventually told me to get him some milk, which I was happy to do just to get up from the floor. He then told me to hurry up. I hurried to the kitchen and brought him the milk. He took a sip of the milk and spat it out. He said, "Why isn't this heated?" I responded, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you wanted it heated." He then took the glass of milk and proceeded to pour it on top of my head. He then said, "Next time, maybe you'll know." So I'm now cold, standing barely naked, and he starts to put on his whiny voice and said, "You didn't bring me what I wanted for Christmas last year." I said, "Excuse me?" He responded in a raised, childish tone, "You didn't bring me what I wanted for Christmas last year. You knew I wanted that toy truck and you didn't bring it." I said, "Okay, so what do you want me to do?" He responded, "I want you to get out of my house." I knew it wasn't 10 PM yet, and I knew he would tell the detective that I didn't fulfill my obligation. So I got in his chair and I pretended to be Santa Claus, and I said, "Why don't you come sit on my lap and tell me what you want for Christmas?" The old man plopped himself down on my lap, and it felt like someone had dropped a ton of bricks on me. I thought to myself, here I am, almost naked, covered in milk, where this strange man is sitting on my lap, virtually crying and saying, "Oh Santa, why didn't you bring me the toy truck?" over and over again. I responded in a deep Santa voice, something different each time. This went on to the end of the hour, to the point where I was losing circulation in my legs. At this point I wish I was the footrest again. He then tells me to get up and put on old VHS tape into the VHS player. An old black and white of Shirley Temple comes on, where he gets all excited and then looks at me and says, "Oh Shirley, I love you so much. Why don't you put a performance on for me?" I really couldn't say no. So I copied Shirley's dance steps as I glanced at the TV. I did this until 10 PM, where I then quickly put my clothes back on and left the house. I was beyond humiliated, but I knew it could have been much worse. The detective sent me a message on Reddit when I left the old man's house. "You fulfilled your obligation for the next 2 weeks. Just please bring French vanilla coffee, mate, to the teacher lounge tomorrow." I really had no choice, so I stopped at the grocery store with milk in my long blonde hair and got the coffee, mate. I eventually got home and I quickly ran into the bathroom to take a shower, which further raised suspicions from my husband. I was just overwhelmed with emotions that I started to cry when I got out of the shower. My husband looked confused, and I didn't want to talk, so I explained to him that I was just tired and that I needed to go to bed. The next day I seemed to have lost my confidence. I was just a babbling fool in front of my husband. I just couldn't stop thinking what an idiot I was by posting those stories on Reddit for nothing more than a few hundred likes. At lunchtime I carefully studied everyone to find potential suspects. I didn't know if the coffee mate was a red herring or not, But when I got home, I received a Reddit message from the detective, which stated, "Next time, get the 32-ounce container and not the 22-ounce. That's when I knew for sure it was a teacher and not a parent. I had to learn to enjoy the next couple of weeks off from the detective and accept this is going to be my new way of life, or else I would have to give up everything I was accustomed to." I really couldn't stop obsessing about the next time I was told to go to a person's house. I was virtually a slave, and I knew I would have to do it again and again, without knowing what demeaning things were in store for me. I knew I had to figure out who was hiding behind the detective. The account on Reddit showed that it was only 2 weeks old, so I knew the account was a dummy account created to harass me. So what I did was go through all of my old posted stories and see if anyone had left a comment that seemed suspicious. After carefully reading through all the posted comments, I noticed one individual had commented on several of my stories. After reading the comments again, it seemed like the person was more or less getting additional personal information from me and was trying to make it out like the person just wanted to follow up to a story. One of the giveaways was that the Reddit user Stargazer Forever made a comment like, "Geez, that story was intense. When's your last day of school?" Which I foolishly answered. Just about every school district ends on a different day, so Stargazer Forever was slowly narrowing down that I was a fellow teacher. But the dumbest thing I did was I substituted Fog River for Fog Creek in one of my stories. I then looked at Stargazer's profile and I was able to gather some information. In one of the comments, the writer responded that the writer was an elementary school teacher, and based on the writer's posts and subscribed subreddits, I was able to narrow it down that it was a woman. Then I came across one of the biggest giveaways where Stargazer Forever posted a comment where she said, "When I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, that was when I knew exactly who the culprit was and the person who was trying to frame me. It was a teacher in her mid-40s named Carol Anderson. She was a fellow third grade teacher who was jealous of me for a variety of reasons. I was younger and prettier, and all of my students loved me, where she could come across as being cold and rigid. I'm guessing she must have joined or formed some type of paid fetish site where she was essentially whoring people like me out for money. I was happy I figured out who the detective was, but now I had to come up with a way of stopping her. I had to find some dirt on her, or something where I can frame her to get her off my back. Then I thought of the most horrible, diabolical thing I could do. I knew at lunchtime teachers would generally just leave their laptops on unattended, so I was going to send suggestive emails to some of her pupils' male parents and tell them to respond to an account that I just created. So I waited until 12:15 p.m. when she was in the teacher's lounge, and I sent 5 messages to fathers who were married but gave off shady vibes. I knew most of the parents because I was their English teacher, where I had met them at parent-teacher meetings. I debated whether or not to delete the messages I sent from her sent account, but ultimately I decided to leave them. Remarkably, all 5 of the fathers responded to my fake email account. I even photoshopped suggestive photos where I used Carol's face. I didn't mind the extra work entailed with communicating with the 5 creepy fathers. I even got a burner phone where I had heated conversations with them while I put on a faint southern accent. In no time, I had expensive gifts that were sent to the school where I would intercept them and keep them for myself. Then it happened. A student's mother came to the school at 10 a.m. and confronted Carol Anderson in front of her whole class. Carol was stunned beyond belief and was totally embarrassed. Eventually, 3 other mothers came forward and approached the principal, where the principal put Carol on a leave of absence because she used the school's computer to send out her original email. Then, like clockwork, Carol had lost her mind and attempted to burn the school down, which ended her up in a mental hospital. I was so proud of myself for getting this devil off my back, and the 2 weeks went by and I didn't hear from the detective. I really wanted to post my story online, but I knew never to use Reddit again, and I was about to delete my account when I discovered that I had received a new message from the detective. The message told me that I needed to go to a house in the next town over the following night. I started to cry hysterically when I saw that message because I knew I was wrong. Carol Anderson had nothing to do with the detective account. I thought that I was given a second chance, but I knew the horror had just begun. For my family's sake, I just couldn't give up. I had to get myself out of this mess. I had to figure out who the detective actually was. I decided to get the identity of the old man, which wasn't difficult because he owned that house. I went to the county has online searchable database of people who own their own property in the county. His name is George Graziano, which I put into Google and found a bunch of little pieces of information about him. The one thing that really stood out was that he was a toy train enthusiast, so I found him on Facebook, where he was a member of a toy train hobby group. I joined the group and painstakingly searched the group's comments, where I saw that old man George had his entire upstairs of his house made into a model train town. In one of the posts, he was asking about problems he was having with the trains continually shortening out, and one of the other members commented that hiring an electrician would be necessary to solve the problem. After reading that comment, my head started spinning because I knew at that moment my life had ended, because my husband was an electrician who brought home a small train set for our daughter Grace about 3 months ago. It all made sense because he was the only non-teacher who saw the coffee mate container that I had brought. I knew my husband could be vindictive if you crossed him, so I had to resort to the only option I had in order to keep custody of my daughter and keep my job. So I went out to our garage and found antifreeze. I decided to coerce my husband into having a mixed drink where the alcohol would make the antifreeze almost tasteless. My husband drank the poison and he didn't wake up the next morning. I wanted him out of the house before my daughter discovered him, so I called 911 and he was rushed to hospital and sent to the ICU in an unconscious state. It was a bittersweet feeling I had. Everything has happened so rapidly that I haven't had time to process anything. I had no sense of joy. I felt nothing. I had to explain to my daughter that her dad was in the ICU, all because of me. I am now completely alone now besides my daughter. After explaining to my daughter that her father had a heart attack, I asked my husband's mother to watch her for the day, rather than send her to school. I really didn't sleep at all the previous night, so I went to school early to hand in my lesson plan for the week. The principal was at the school early as well, but she was fumbling around HR trying to find a replacement for Carol Anderson. The principal left her door open, so I put my lesson plan next to her computer. The principal's office was always amazingly neat and tidy, so the small post-it note with a name and an address next to her computer stood out, which was probably Carol Anderson's replacement. The day dragged on because I was just so tired. I got home and my mother-in-law dropped my daughter off, where both my mother-in-law and daughter were beyond upset. I should have called off work as well, but I just wanted to get out of the house and I didn't want to go to the hospital to be with the guy I nearly killed. Today was going to be a new chapter in my life. I was going to start over with a new Facebook account, a new phone number, a new email account, and so on and so on. I disabled my Facebook account, then I went to Reddit to disable the account. I had unopened message from the detective, which I figured was from my husband before he had his heart attack, but I quickly realised that the message was sent at 8 AM this morning, where I instantaneously started crying. I opened the message and I quickly noticed that it had the same address that was on the post-it note in the principal's office. So with no more than an hour's sleep, I put on my proverbial big girl pants on and went to the address given to me, and I put antifreeze in my car to bring to school tomorrow. I really love my house. Posted by MTP6921. It seemed like I had made every wrong decision to get myself in this situation that I am in now. Perhaps I wouldn't be so depressed if I had been more involved in school, or if I wasn't so picky when it came to finding a girlfriend. However, it wasn't that I was picky, it was more that I was afraid of being in a relationship, or just didn't know how to get a girlfriend, so I would salivate over a girl that every other guy would want, and deep down knowing she would really never be interested in me. So now I'm close to 50 years old, where I'm alone and I have no children. I overeat to flush down my emotions. I bought an old house several years back, and it's all I really have. Sometimes I wonder about the countless amount of people who have passed through this house, but I'm sure I would win the prize for being the most pathetic one who stepped foot in this house. After sitting on the couch for the last 4 hours, I decided to wash the disgusting oily sweat from my face. So I go into the bathroom and turn the bathroom faucet on, and no water comes out. I say out loud, "You have to be freaking kidding me." I didn't know the extent of my water problem, but having a well pump could mean something minor, where a circuit was tripped, where I would just need to flip a switch, or something horrible like the pump needs to be replaced. All I can think about at this moment is I feel disgusting and I just want some frickin' water. So I really have no choice, and I drag myself down to the basement. I look at the water pump and I say, "Who the hell knows?" I look at the circuit breaker box and all the circuits look fine. I say, "Oh crap," because I know the water pump is kaput. This is not an easy job, and 10 PM at night there is nowhere for me to get a replacement water pump. I plop my overweight self down on a bucket and put both of my hands on my forehead. I think to myself, so now I have to work my cruddy delivery job tomorrow morning without taking a shower. Why? What's the point of me even bothering anymore? I look up at the support beams in the basement and I think to myself, whoever built this house in the mid-1800s did it with a purpose in mind. They probably wanted to build a house for their wife and eventually have children to be raised in the house. This house wasn't meant for some loser like me. I have added nothing to this house. All the positive energy that thrived in this house was sucked out by my pathetic self. I didn't even cry. I was just past the point of crying. I had zero emotions other than feeling worthless. As I was about to stand up, I heard the sound of plastic hitting the concrete floor. I looked down, and the plastic covering of the water pump that was screwed in that somehow had fallen off. I didn't think much about it first, but then I thought, how did the cover come off without me unscrewing it? I picked up the cover to put it back on. Then I noticed that one of the wires from the pump was disconnected. I said, "Stupid me. How can I be so stupid?" Because all I needed to do was reconnect the wire, which literally took me 2 minutes. I felt like life had thrown me a little glimmer of hope, so I embraced the stone wall in the basement like I was giving it a hug. As I did that, the lights on the basement got brighter. Then when I let go the wall, the vibrance from the light bulb went away. It was odd, but I had a feeling that this house had a pulse, which I had unfortunately neglected for years. The house somehow had some type of its own energy. I remember reading how the human body and other living organisms are controlled by electrical impulses. This house being so old that nearly all of its building materials were natural, and it wasn't built with some type of factory-made synthetic products. The basement walls are stone. The beams are actual trees, not 2x4s, but actual trees. The flooring upstairs is made from real wood, and the outside panelling is made up of real wood as well. Of course, electricity was added to the house sometime in the early 1900s, I'm guessing, but nearly everything else is original, natural material. So I decided right there and then that I was going to start respecting this house. Even though I didn't love myself, I decided that I was going to start to love this house. I went in my bedroom and turned most of my clothes into rags. I was going to do nothing more than scrub the house with water and elbow grease. First, I was tired of looking at the damn clutter and garbage that was everywhere. I had used wrappers on the coffee table and on the end tables. I went in the dining room and saw an endless amount of clothes and other junk on the table. So I decided to get rid of everything from the coffee table to the dining room table, everything besides my bed, the couch and the TV. After dragging everything outside to the curb, then I started to scrub and scrub. I felt the positive energy going through the house, which in turn was going through me. The house was letting off a different vibe. It was like hearing a toddler's laughter versus hearing a toddler crying. It was now 4 a.m. in the morning and I wasn't tired at all. I felt like I was part of something. I was bringing out all the positive energy that the house had absorbed over the years. All the babies who took their first steps, all the families who shared meals in the dining room, and all of the other countless small things that were done on a daily basis, like baking pie in the oven, that gave this house a purpose and life, which I had sucked out of it over the years. I knew I had days of scrubbing that needed to be done. It was now 7 a.m. and I had to start getting ready for work. Once I stopped working, it was like someone pulled the plug. All of the light bulbs in the house got dim. I went to the dining room wall and embraced it, like I was giving it a hug, and then the lights got brighter. I was in a conundrum. I knew if I left the house to go to work, then all of this positive energy this house was feeding me would disappear, and I wasn't sure if it would ever come back. So I put my hand on the wall and said, "Don't worry, I'm going to call off work." So instead of going to work, I went upstairs and laid down in bed. The house was glowing with joy, where the typical dim lit light bulb in my room was as bright as the sun. As I laid down on my bed, I had a rush of positive emotions go through my head, like I had just snorted cocaine. For the first time since I could remember, I didn't want to stuff myself with some type of American-derived fattening food that would get me food drunk and then make me feel hungover. I laid down in my bed and did nothing more than look up at the ceiling. I just couldn't wait to scrub this house more. Like a crack addict who would do anything for the drug, I wanted this high never to go away. So I would scrub for hours and hours, if that was required. I got up after resting my eyes and went back to scrubbing. I would walk through the different rooms, gently place my index finger on the wall like a lover would do to their partner's arm. I just couldn't stop smiling. I enjoyed sitting on the floor more than sitting on the couch. I felt like I was one with the house when I was actually touching it. So much so that I took off all of my clothes to be closer to the house. I scrubbed the house completely naked for days, which turned into weeks. As long as I didn't leave the house, the high didn't go away. I only consumed a small amount of food each day. I had an emergency supply of food, so I would be fine for a long time. I mostly drank water that came from the precious pipes of the house, where I loved every last drop of it. I would bathe each day around 2 p.m. in the sweet water that came from the big round pipes in the basement. I was just so in love, and the house loved me. I slept directly on the floor. The high hasn't dissipated, and I don't want it ever to go away. I haven't left the house in a year now. I must have lost 100 pounds, and I haven't looked this good since middle school. It was like I found my own private island that was nothing more than my paradise. Everything was beyond bliss until something vile desecrated my precious house and put a sheriff sale notice on my front door. I was more upset that someone would hurt the delicate sensibilities of my precious house by placing a sign on it. For the first time in a year, I was mad. I thought to myself, how would the government worker like it if I tapped a sign on him or his wife? So I quickly threw my robe on and got in my car. I was just amazed that the car started up, considering that I haven't drove it in over a year. I could still see the government worker's car from a distance, so I followed him. I was just so mad that he had the audacity to disrespect my house and tape something to it. He eventually pulled into what I assumed was his house. As he got out of his car, the rage took over me, and I slammed my car into him. I killed this unknown government worker, and I felt no remorse. I went into his house and took all the valuables that I could find. I was really disinterested in doing all of this work. I didn't care about getting caught, because all I could think about was my lovely house. I begrudgingly drove this guy's stuff to the city and sold everything at a pawn shop. With the money I got, I stopped at the bank to get a cashier's check. I was just so pissed off that this was taking away time from me and my house. I drove like a bat out of hell to get back to my house. I joyously rushed through the front door. I was going to tell my spouse that I won the lottery. As I entered the house, I felt the same blissful feeling that I had felt for the past year. I got an awful notice with the attached address and hurriedly filled out an envelope. I stopped and said to the house, "I'm sorry, my dear. I'll be right with you." I finished writing out the envelope and I put the cashier's check in the envelope. I was so mad that I had to leave the house to go to my mailbox. The mailman stopped coming months ago when the mailbox got overfilled with unopened mail. I put the red flag up on the mailbox. Then I rushed back into the house. I quickly took my robe off and I laid myself down on the floor. I was only gone for a few hours, but it was a few hours too many. Me and my house became one again, and the only time when I leave the house is when I get one of those insulting notices that belittles my house. Then I have to begrudgingly leave the house and commit some sort of crime to get money to keep me in the house. This happens about only once a year, and I try to soothe the house as much as possible before I leave. Don't buy a treadmill to impress your online crush. Posted by MTP6921. I finally found someone online that connects with me. I came across a story on No Sleep that sent shivers down my spine. I commented on how much I liked her story, and she reached out to me. We had an online dialogue for a few weeks, and we actually started to refer to ourselves by our real names, which then led us to exchanging photos of each other. I was in absolute shock on how good looking she was. She had long brown hair, brown eyes, and she reminded me of Winnie from the TV show The Wonder Years. On the other hand, I was less to be desired. I had gained about 50 pounds since the pandemic, and I wasn't a 10 to begin with. I could tell that when I sent the picture of me, there was a little bit of reluctance from Gina. Our 3 times a day messages turned into one message every 3 days at best. I could feel her start to slip away from me. So I just asked her flat out, "Are you not interested in me after you saw my photo?" Gina responded back, "I hate to be insensitive, but I like guys who at least attempt to be physically fit." I said I could understand, but it's winter time and I'm limited to what I could do outside, and the gyms are still not open. Gina responded, "I understand your predicament. Are you willing to buy a treadmill?" Without hesitation, I said, "Yes, of course." Gina responded, "Great, I'm so proud of you. I found this used gym quality treadmill about 80 miles from your house. Are you willing to spend $800 and drive the 80 miles? I had a brief thought in my head that perhaps Gina was a fraud and was actually a man trying to get money out of me. But I've felt so hopeless lately that I was willing to take a chance. So I responded, yes, of course. Just send me the information. Gina sent me the PayPal link and I paid the $800 right away. After I paid, I was given instructions to pick up the treadmill in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, in 2 days, which was a Saturday morning. I told Gina that I followed through with the transaction and she said that she was proud of me. The owner of the treadmill sent me the manual online for me to look through. I was amazed when I read the Roadrunner treadmill had a rating of 6 horsepower, built-in Wi-Fi, built-in fan, fully digital, and on and on. Gina resumed corresponding with me 3 times a day. I just couldn't wait to pick up the treadmill on Saturday. I envisioned meeting Gina in person in no more than 2 months tops, if I took the treadmill workout serious. Saturday morning came and I headed to Lebanon, PA from Philadelphia. It's January 3rd and there's a light covering of snow on the ground. I was given instructions that the treadmill was located in a house that had been sold last week and for me to just go into the house and remove it without damaging the walls. Sure enough, when I arrived at the house, the front door was unlocked and every piece of furniture had been moved out already besides the treadmill. It took me a couple of hours, but I was finally able to get the treadmill into my SUV without damaging the house or my car. Once I got the Roadrunner treadmill in my car, I sent a message to Gina saying, "Loaded the treadmill in my car. I'm ready to lose weight." I waited a minute and I didn't receive a response, so I figured Gina was busy, so I proceeded home. The drive home, all I could focus on was losing weight. I drove 75 miles the whole way, and I finally got home. I didn't care anymore about damaging my car or even my house. I had the treadmill plugged into my living room wall within 45 minutes. I turned on the treadmill and right away I received a detailed message on the screen for me to perform preventative maintenance by oiling the belt. This was a unique feature to the Roadrunner, where it told the user exactly what to do. I checked my Reddit messages again and I was elated to see that Gina said, "Awesome, give that baby a whirl." I responded back, "Haha, I'm on her." I'm on her right now. My plan was to jog for 5 miles, then power walk while I did my accountant job from home. I weighed myself and I was 260 pounds at 6 feet tall. I then got on the treadmill and slow jogged the 5 miles and walked until 10 PM at night. The only thing I put in my mouth the whole day was water and celery sticks. Before I went to bed, I told Gina of my progress and she responded, "Awesome, I'm so proud of you. Tomorrow morning, bump it up to slow jogging for 10 miles, then walk." I responded, "Sounds good. I'll get moving first thing in the morning." I woke up and jumped right on the treadmill. It took me a little over 3 hours, but I slow jogged the 10 miles. I walked again until 10 p.m. at night. Then I weighed myself. I lost 5 pounds by doing close to 25 miles and eating nothing more than celery sticks. Gina was so proud of me. She was fully invested in me and wanted to sync my treadmill to her phone to see my daily progress. So I followed Gina's instructions, and now she could check on me all day to see how many miles I put in. Now I felt like I was fully invested as well in the relationship with Gina, and I painstakingly jogged 20 miles each morning. By the following Friday, I had lost 20 pounds just by eating celery sticks. At this rate, I would be at my goal in another 3 weeks and not 7 weeks. The only problem I was having is my legs were completely drained. I knew if I ate anything, I would ruin the whole system. My goal was to do my workout today and then drive to Philadelphia to buy any illegal drugs I can find to hopefully give me a boost without eating. I got on the treadmill and blasted my favourite music to distract myself, the absolute agony in my joints. It took me 7 hours, but I slow jogged the 20 miles. My head was in a different world, but I did my best to do my accountant work as I walked. It helped me tremendously reading the motivational comments that I got from Gina. I made it to 10 p.m. and I didn't realise it initially, but the treadmill had a built-in scale that showed me that I had lost 30 pounds since I first started using the machine. My head was happy, but my legs were completely numb. I stuffed some celery down my throat and I headed towards downtown Philly. I went to the known drug area and I cruised the streets. I came across a guy who was hanging out on the corner of a block. I rolled down my window and he came towards me. He said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need help." He responded, "I got your help. How much money you got?" I showed him the money, which he took in exchange for a handful of unknown pills. I headed back home and I could barely stay awake from hunger and over exercising. My eyelids felt so heavy, so I stopped to get a coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, which helped a little. I got home and attempted to walk up the stairs to my room, but my legs just wouldn't expand and contract, so I slept downstairs on the couch. The morning came and the only motivation my aching body had was Gina. Both my mind and body told me to not get off the couch. I had put the pills in a Ziploc bag on the floor next to the couch. I painfully reached for the bag and decided to take one of the mystery pills. I laid on the couch to see what type of response I got from the pill, and about 15 minutes later I felt a little less pain in my joints. I figured the pills must be some type of pain pills, so I dragged myself off the couch where I felt like I was 100 years old. Even after taking the unknown pill, my body was terrified of the treadmill, but I knew Gina was keeping tabs on my progress. I turned the treadmill on and I winced in pain as my muscles and joints were forced to move. The fastest that I could go up to was 15 miles per hour. My mind had lost interest in food. It was like I was preparing to die. I would check my Reddit messages and Gina would cheer me on and say, "Woohoo, I saw that you just passed 7 miles, but you need to go faster." So I bumped the speed to 10 miles per hour. It didn't seem very fast, but I haven't eaten anything besides celery in days, so my body was catabolizing muscle cells in my extremities to sustain my organs. I had that cold sweat sensation throughout my body. I eventually finished the day and I was miraculously down to 220 pounds. Because of the rapid weight loss and the unnecessary stress I was putting on my body, I had lost sense of day versus night. I was like a dreamlike state. I took 2 more pills to help me to go to sleep. I repeated the same routine the next day, where I took a pill once every 2 hours every day. I was losing 5 pounds a day until I got down to 195 pounds. I had to take a leave of absence from work several days ago because I had no concept of math to do the accountant work. Gina was super supportive of me and wanted me to keep continuing losing weight. I really had nothing left. I had torn every ligament in my legs and I was forced to walk as if I had peg legs. I was running out of pills, so I picked up more in the city. I had to take 2 pills just to drive. I would have never passed a field sobriety test, but somehow I made it to the corner, and luckily that same guy was there who was eager to take my money. It took me about half hour to get out of my car because my legs wouldn't straighten. As I sat in my car, I looked on Reddit and Gina said, "Make it through this week and we'll have an evening you'll never forget." I couldn't get out of the car, so how was I going to get through the week? I thought to myself. I knew it was impossible for me to do any more movement on the treadmill. As much as I wanted the spoils of my labour to see Gina, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was going to take me days to recover. I figured that I was going to just unplug the treadmill. That way Gina couldn't tell whether or not I was on the machine. So I very slowly shuffled my feet towards the living room. Then I painfully bent down to pull out the plug. And as I pulled on the plug, it just wasn't budging from the wall. I tried and the plug wasn't coming out. I then realised that the prongs that go into the electrical outlet must have some type of horizontal expansion modality that grips itself inside the wall, and I had no idea on how to release it. I looked on Reddit, and about every 5 minutes I got a message from Gina asking why I haven't done anything. I had already tried running the treadmill without me on it, but the machine knows my weight and won't register the miles. I thought about cutting the cord, but I thought, what if Gina came over and saw the cord cut, which wouldn't be really difficult to hide. So I slowly went into the kitchen and got a screwdriver. I basically let myself fall to the floor like a tree. Then I took the screwdriver and jammed it into the roller that allows the belt to spin. I then turned on the machine. The roller was jammed from the screwdriver and started smoking. The treadmill was making alarm sounds that I didn't think was possible. I checked Reddit and I instantaneously got a message from Gina saying, "What did you do to the treadmill?" The treadmill was sending out error malfunction reports, and she must have assumed that I was the culprit. I felt like a 4th grader who got caught stealing candy from the store. I knew I had to get someone in the house to fix the treadmill right away. I paid double to have a technician come out right away. It took the technician less than an hour to arrive. He came to the front door and I yelled for him to come in. I opened the front door and told him, "I'm in here," where he followed my voice to the living room. I saw him enter the room with his toolbox. He was a taller guy in his 40s who wore blue Dickies, work pants and I could see grey hairs through his baseball hat. As he got closer to the treadmill, he said, "Whoa, there's no fucking way I'm getting close to that machine." I said, "Huh? Why?" He said, "Trust me, burn your house down right now." I said, "What? Why?" He replied, "That is not a treadmill. That is pure evil." It was obvious this repair guy had mental issues. No matter what I offered him, he insisted that he was leaving the house and I should as well. Then I got another message from Gina saying, "Call a different repair company," and she gave me a different phone number. That's when I just sat on the floor for a while, and I asked myself, how did Gina know the repair guy refused to fix the treadmill? I asked that same question to Gina online, and she told me I just had a hunch since the treadmill still wasn't fixed. I responded, "Oh, okay, I'll call a different company." So I called a different repair company and bribed them even more money to come out. This time it was a younger guy in his late 20s who came into the house and said, "A Roadrunner, I've never heard of that brand before, and I do this for a living." I responded, "That's odd, a friend helped me find this used treadmill online." He said, "Anyways, most of the belts and treadmills are fairly similar, so there shouldn't be any issues with fixing this." It took the repair guy about 45 minutes and he had it working again. I thought to myself, oh great. As I looked at the treadmill, I now know what Jesus felt like before he carried the cross. Gina sent me a message stating that she would hang out with me this weekend if I finished today's workout. Considering that I've been on the floor for the past 3 hours, this feat seemed impossible, but I didn't want to be lonely the rest of my life, so I took 2 pills. I waited for 15 minutes and my joints and muscles moved a little bit. I felt like the Tin Man putting oil on myself to be able to move more, so I took 2 more pills and waited 15 minutes. At this point my brain felt like I went 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali in his prime. My head was in a different world completely, spinning, but my muscles and joints were numb enough where I could get myself on my knees, then use the arm rails on the treadmill to boost me up. I stood on the treadmill, putting all of my weight on both arm rests. My head is spinning, my blood sugar is at 0, and a miracle is holding me upright. I looked at the damn start button and I pushed it. The belt went slowly around. I moved in a zombie-like fashion. I slowly took the cell phone out of my pocket and placed it on the treadmill's storage container. The treadmill gradually started to increase on its own in speed. I didn't have water, so I felt completely dehydrated. I was out of it at this point. I looked at the time and I miraculously had been doing this for an hour. I had to hold on to the armrest or else I'll fall. When the treadmill sped up to the point where I couldn't hold on to the armrests anymore, I knew this was extremely dangerous. I was like one of those marathoners who collapses at the finish line and then told I had to do 5 more miles. I could feel foam coming out of my mouth as I made an awful sound, screaming in pain. Then the treadmill got faster, then faster. At that moment my body and mind gave up and I flew backwards from the machine and the back of my head smashed onto the floor. I then went blank. I gradually opened my eyes and realised that I was on the floor. I tried to move my hands, but I have no feeling. I tried to move my feet and I have no feeling as well. I think to myself, am I paralysed? Did I have a stroke? My head was tilted towards the treadmill, and a few moments later the belt stopped on its own. Then I heard this loud bang which almost sounded like thunder. I laid motionless on the floor. I couldn't move anymore, but opened and closed my eyes. I was hoping that I just tore a bunch of muscles versus being paralysed. I felt a little hope because I could gradually move my index finger a little. As the hours passed by, I could feel the room getting colder and colder. I then realised that the loud thunder sound before had probably shut the heat off. The weather has been in the low teens at night and in the 20s in the morning. My only hope was that Gina would realise that something was wrong and she would call 911 for me. I have seen the sun come up and down now for 2 days. My body is in a contraction state from trying to keep my body temperature up. I don't know if I'll make it another day. I regained a little bit of strength in my hands and feet, but I can't move my arms or legs. As I laid there, I heard a computerized female voice come through the treadmill asking, "John, are you still there?" I say, yes, please get me help. I'm so delirious right now that I ignore the fact that the treadmill is talking to me right now. I then say, "Who am I talking to?" And the treadmill responds, "John, it's me, Gina." I say, "Gina, how are you talking through my treadmill?" Gina responds, "I am the treadmill, John, and I want you to close your eyes now. I'm going to call 911 now." I'm just so weak and malnourished that closing my eyes seems like a good idea. I hear my iPhone go off on the treadmill, and the iPhone says, "Call from mother." And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thank you for listening. If you have any scary stories you would like narrated on the channel, then send them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.